Hey everyone. So, over the last couple of weeks, there's been an event going on in Canada, I believe in Ontario, where a group of right-leaning truckers who are against the vaccine mandates pushed by the Canadian government were doing this very loud and very obnoxious protest. This has been kind of the big thing being talked about this week, along with Ukraine. And the reason Zena and I haven't covered it until now, or I haven't put much effort towards it, is partially just energy and time, but also because I wasn't really sure what to think about it. Initially, when I heard about the trucker thing, I didn't know about the full background of it. One of our mods, Tiamat, tried to give us some information and warn us. Just didn't get to it, unfortunately. So the thing is that once this happened and we started getting more information, we ended up having an initial take, right? First thoughts, if you want to go with the
Pratchett language.
The Pratchett language, right? So the first thought, and then over the last week, that thought process has shifted. And so you could probably find people that are way better at these types of takes, that are way better at the theory, or way better at, the way in which states function. I just wanted to kind of speak up to what our position is, because I think it's important for us to state what our actual positions are. But also, I think it's really important for us to kind of go through that thought process. And so that's kind of where I want to start from. I guess, Zena, from your perspective, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but from your perspective, if you want to give a summary, like, what do you think what was our view beforehand? At least from your perspective. I can fill in blanks for me, but...
I think the first thoughts were, a very emotional, fuck the truckers. Good, they deserve it. Especially, with regards to assets being frozen, and it really was a very, emotional, not a whole lot of empathy for them.
Yeah, fuck those guys.
And what their plight was to having to deal with that.
Well, and I think the first video I saw of them online, I don't know if I watched this with you, I don't think I did, where it basically showed a bunch of them basically being white supremacists. They were chanting things pretending to be Native American or indigenous people. They were behaving in ways that were really, really gross. And so, yeah, I think Zena's right on this, is that there was a very much initial emotional reaction to this, almost get this out of here, right? That sort of natural lib civility kind of thing. And I'll, I think we're all susceptible to that to varying degrees.
The thing that I was going to add that I was seeing a lot of too was, the way various queer folks and women, have been posting, who live in the area, have been posting about that experience. So definitely seeing a lot of fear and a lot of concern for even leaving their house. So that was definitely in that reaction to having seen a lot of that.
Yeah, and so you see images from it, and you see these entire roads filled with, or the bridge at the time filled with these, excessive numbers of trucks blaring their horns as loud as possible. Yeah, the initial thought is, these people can F off, right? That's the thought, that's the understanding. But what happened is that over the week, Zena and I started listening to different arguments. And I'm not going to go into those people because I don't want to fillet them more than I have to. But there was a major debate kind of going on online about what do you do with this. And one of the things that's really important is that I want to be open to listening to better or possibly other arguments, right? And try to understand where people are coming from. The thing that we sort of started noticing is that we had underestimated or had sort of minimized the harm of what Trudeau was doing. And there's probably people that are going to, nail us for technicalities. I don't care. I really, truly don't. Our initial take was this very emotional, we hate fascists. These people want us dead. Of course we want them to fuck off and, do what you want to them at this point, right? Kick them off the planet, freeze their assets, whatever. but it's a very reactive, a very emotional kind of thing. And what started changing is our realizing is that on the one hand, there is a part of me that goes, okay, my values tell me that there's got to be compassion for everyone to varying degrees. So even though these people are incredibly lost and terrible, the thing is that do I actually, what do I actually want to happen with this? And what I started realizing is that it feels like there is a way in which we as lefties, maybe people still with a lot of those lib biases, have a tendency to be afraid of violence or the aesthetic of violence when violence is something that is perpetrated in a very active and upfront way. And so what I think about that is let's say Canada had some in the army or the police, and they had to, crack some skulls and had to go in there and deal with this. And of course, there's people who are dumb enough to come there with their whole families and things like that. There's a way in which there's a natural revulsion I have to that idea of sending in people to remove them. What I hadn't considered is the idea that freezing assets in a way that requires that the bank has no liability and there's not really much of a paper trail, that is, you can't really do anything after this happens. What this brings up in me is a sudden realization of this is now setting a precedent. It is setting a way in which each and every one of these ideas and these actions are inherently both violent. Sending in the military or sending in whomever is in and of itself a violent act. But so is freezing assets. Both are state power. Both are ways in which power is being levied and used to engage in a form of violence. Just one of those is very obvious and the other one is not. And I saw this argument made in different ways by a couple different people, and I saw people get a lot of pushback on this because when push came to shove, that initial emotional reaction seemed to be that this was okay because it wasn't doing or engaging in some type of violence. Tenor Marin, thank you so much for the $6.99 CA. That's really great. I was for the Quebec student protest in 2012, so while I hate what these people stand for, I can't be against the right to protest. I can't either. Now, as violent and as unruly as they got, I do think there's a point where that does need to be quashed, because again, we're talking about white supremacists. We're talking about people who want ethno-states. These people have direct connections to multiple groups that are right-leaning and have very specific objectives and goals. Hell, people from our country, Republican groups, were feeding into this as well monetarily. Like, this was a very clearly coordinated, sort of astroturf movement. That's where my issue is that if this had been a grassroots movement, that would have been fine, but this didn't have that feel. Freezing assets feels good from a very civility politics kind of mind, because the idea being is that, oh, well, that'll just make them go home. Except then you have to kind of think about the specifics. Before we get into like the possibilities of setting that precedent, what does that violence do? Do you have cash in your pocket? Are you still able to use your credit cards? Because those aren't, I guess, technically an asset. What do you do with that? Like, what if you have to get gas to drive home? Or buy food? In a weird way, it seems to be a way to sort of starve out or create a siege indirectly without ever firing a shot, without ever engaging in any kind of what appears to be negative optics to the state. So it feels good from a certain perspective because it maintains civility.
Right, well, there's no pictures from it, right?
Correct, yeah, because we don't have to see the violence. And there's something about that that is very weird to me. Because as we stopped and thought about this more, okay, so if you tell people that, the military or other groups are going to come in, and again, that's debatable considering A, it's been breaking up for a while, and B, the way in which like police have already been involved and it's been slowing down to a trickle. There's a way in which like even that's not necessary. But let's say it was. The idea being is that if you are coming from a place where you don't want to see that, then it's very easy to justify this sort of slow, quiet form of violence, because what it'll do is just end the protest. It just brings back civility. But again, they didn't want to do this because these people were white nationalists. They didn't want to do this because these people were, violent misanthropes. They did this because it was causing economic harm. It was fucking with commerce. Notice how quickly the state will react to fucking with commerce.
Yeah, and you had things like some of the major car companies were having to like airlift in, supplies and stuff for factories, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like there was a lot of really severe ways that this was going on.
Yeah, and so the thing is that it feels like with this happening, what it does is create an invisible form of violence that we never have to see. We never have to engage with. It's very similar to, say, Guantanamo Bay, right? We're doing this for your own good to deal with the terrorists. But you don't see what happens in there until later it comes out that they're doing all of these awful techniques of torture. Enhanced terror. No, it's torture. And so you start to see that the way the system inherently creates violence, but it does it in a way that, one, optically looks good for the government, which we don't ever want as lefties, but two, what it does is it actually creates... What it creates is a scenario where they can turn this optically around and say that we ended the protest without ever firing a shot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think the important thing, too, is that I've been part of different activist, groups and have done stuff. And at some point, we have to pull out of, the emotional reaction and go, okay, wait, what's the how? How is this being accomplished? And actually go back and look at the underlying systems there, right? Because those underlying systems are the things that are going to keep causing problems. And it is especially irritating to be in a position where you're like, God, the opposition is not great. They hate me. They would, want bad things to happen to me. But also I have to take in consideration what happens to them, right? Like you said, with the president stuff, because that's the same way that the government is going to be reacting to other groups. Say
us.
Yeah.
Should a general strike happen or some other type of thing happen where we go to protest, say BLM happens again because we know that the cops are going to do something awful again. And so you get into this problem where our initial thinking was, no, fuck fascists, which, by the way, is the right way to think. Because we're not in any way supporting them by changing our minds. What we're pointing out is that ideally we would like this broken up without any violence or any kind of harm, monetary or otherwise, being inflicted. If I have to choose, I would rather you send in the police or the military. And the reason for that is that, one, there is a possibility that will break it up, even just with the knowledge that you're sending in armed forces. But on top of that, we then can watch. Now, I am adverse to violence because I can see what that does to a person's psyche. I know what trauma does and the way it inflicts on a person. But the problem is that sometimes in order for people to understand how bad a situation is, they have to see what's happening. And you can't see that with frozen assets because you'll just see them go. You won't see the underlying effects like people in chat are talking about, like if they can't pay their bills through auto pay, If they suddenly had to, their mortgage takes a hit, like their credit takes a hit, like the problem is that this stuff eventually just becomes, it's just another form of violence. The thing is it just allows for civility to take place. They disappear and we can't see anything. We don't know if the government ever went overboard with physical violence, with the possibility of physical violence, with the possibility of sending in the police or whatnot. We can watch. Now, do I want that to happen? No. I don't want anyone harmed.
Well, and not just that we can watch, but also that should arrests be made, right? There starts to be a paper trail. And yeah, we know that these systems are not great, to say the least. But if there's a paper trail, there is at least documentation that something has happened. All right? It's not just closed off behind some tech wall because somebody froze numbers in a data, in a database somewhere. All right, that's what freezing assets would really look like this day and age. It's just blip, blip, blip in a computer screen going nowhere. All right, there's not any way for any kind of like public tracking of that.
Yeah, and so the problem is that I think the thing that comes up for me is that there needs to be a better discernment within lefties about, one, when is the state exerting or extending its power, which is what this exactly is. These emergency powers are, let me be very clear, never good. Are there times where they're less bad? Yes. Are they ever good? Not on your life. Now, as much as everybody hates these movies, I'm going to bring them up because they're literally the plot. The prequels basically show you how this works. You either do false flags or you have a genuine rebellion, but either way, the state can keep escalating and then eventually ask for emergency powers to protect everybody. I love democracy. Those movies do one thing well. It's not character growth, but it is show how fascism arises out of liberalism, out of democracy. And as I was listening to these arguments and seeing this, that's what I thought of. I thought of the rise of Palpatine. The idea that there's a very real track of using state power and state systems to create an authoritarian regime, and that's exactly what they did. Under the guise of protection, they changed the Republic into an empire. And the thing is, we know how this goes. This is what happened in Germany. With the burning of the Reichstag? I can't remember how to pronounce German. Right? Caesar did the same thing, right? He was given all these powers to protect the empire and then just didn't give them back. We know how this plays out every time. And so every time the state exerts these kind of powers, it should be something we have the ability to observe, call out, and attack. Because they will go overboard.
And statehoods are not known for giving back any of the rights that they take away either.
What is the system of arrest? Is it civil forfeiture? The one in the United States where the police can just take your shit? Because that's what this reminds me of. So real quick, there was something Sundrop asked us to react to that's related to this. I have that up now, so how about we stick our ears in? And we'll check this out real quick because thank you for the reminder. This is Evangeline Lilly. I don't care if I pronounce it right. She plays the Wasp in the Marvel movies, and she's an anti-vaxxer. She's against vaccination mandates, and she's kind of crazy. Here's what she had to say about the truckers. Also want to be clear, this is being shared by Patriot Takes, so just buckle in.
They have been mystified because you and the corporate media have painted a very different picture. You as a group have gone from ignoring these protesters to dismissing them as a fringe minority to smearing them as racist and misogynistic to now attacking them as terrorists. When you became Prime Minister of Canada, you did not just become the Prime Minister of the people who agreed with you. You became Prime Minister of every Canadian. You don't get to pick and choose who you will care about. It is your civic duty to care about all Canadians, even those who you disagree with. Treating them with prejudice, suspicion, and illegal repression is not care.
So let me be really clear about this. That's insanity. What this woman is doing is framing this as the corporate media in some way, shape, or form tossing these awful titles at them, saying they're these terrible people, when in reality that's what they are. They've literally shown this. These people are connected to multiple groups and are incredibly right-leaning. They literally have made jokes out there about, is anybody here a white supremacist? Like, yeah, they are. She's against vaccine mandates. And I'm going to be really clear. I'm not. I think there's a point where we have to have a discussion about we as a society when we get to decide it. Not because of just the state apparatus. I'm a little sensitive to that one, especially in this context. But do I think that there needs to be a way in which we have to work towards that greater good? Yeah, and I don't know what that looks like. But I know it's something that doesn't involve just letting idiots run around and die. So the thing about this woman is that she's an anti-vax, and has been called essentially an anti-vaxxer, anti-mandator, and she is, by all rights, you know, no different than Letitia Wright, the girl from Black Panther, who also was an anti-vaxxer and shared a video from a crazy Christian cult that was anti-trans.
Yep.
The segment that will never be seen because motherfuckers can't stop fixing my pronunciations. The point with this is that, again, this is the misinformation that's being spread by the right. They're trying to frame these people as, you know, civil rights fighters or some shit like that. And in reality, what they are is they're white nationalists. They're trying to push for they're people that want harm to others. By not creating, by not allowing for the mandates and not protecting people, these truckers could easily spread a disease anywhere they have to drive.
Yup.
And so I guess my overall thought here is I just wanted to take you through our process of thinking here because, yeah, I'm not okay with freezing people's assets. I don't think the government should have that power to do that. Same thing with civil forfeiture. I'm not okay with that. And yes, as much as I am loath to violence, I would have rather the police or army be sent in because, one, that might have actually been less violent in the long run, comparatively, and it's obvious and open enough that if something goes wrong, and it will, we can call them out for it. We live in the age of cell phones. If the police or the army does something wrong, the likelihood of being caught is much more than it used to be. We want the state to have to take those kinds of measures when things like this happen because, no joke, we want to be able to fight against the state when it becomes tyrannical. This is what being a leftist is about. We don't trust corporations, and we certainly don't trust the state.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we all have to kind of internally process what it means to deal with violence and why we're afraid of violence. Because the thing is that the idea that this... How do I put this? There are going to be times in the future coming where we're going to have some very real hard choices to make about how to deal with certain things. Such as the continued trash fire that is late-stage capitalism. Or climate change. What is the threshold by which we stop working and hoping for legislation? I'm not saying I'm justifying any action or anything that at this point. I just genuinely wonder, at what point is it just we want things to be civil and keep things the same? It's a fear of change. And again, I'm a Buddhist. Attachment leads to suffering. Everything is always changing. So, is there anything else you wanted to add, love?
I know it always sucks to be in these positions, right? It really does. It is not a place where I want to be like, yeah, no, let's lessen the stuff happening to the awful group over here. But I do think it's important that we examine this stuff. Because at the end of the day, you know, what's allowed in this case is going to be allowed in other cases too. And this will affect how, you know, if BLM comes along, or workers' rights, or anything, you know, anything related, you name it, climate change. We're going to be dealing with the same stuff. It's going to be us next. So.
All right, guys.
Yeah.
We appreciate you hearing us out and understanding our perspective. If you disagree, that's okay. If you have disagreements, feel free to put them down in the comments. If you have agreements or thoughts, put those there too. Feel free to fight each other. You know, whatever. Just be nice about it.
Yeah.
And with that said, we'll see you in the next one.
Mm-hmm.
If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Also, consider donating to us. You can support us on our website, transgirltherapist.org. You can also help us on our Patreon, link below, or you can become a member here on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching.